Hi, my name is Marcus Green and I'm going to demonstrate the Moodle stack question type, which was specifically designed for the teaching and learning of maths. And this example uses the 2 times table, and all of these questions will use trivial maths so I can focus on the features of the question type. So the question is, what is 2 times 8? And that value 8 there has been generated randomly from the range 2 to 10, so all even values between 2 and 10. If I click the Start a New Preview button here, you can see there it's changed to from 2 times 8 to 2 times 10. When I was at school, 2 times 10 was 20, and it confirms it still is 20. I get 1 out of 1 available marks. Another feature of stack is the ability to have optional validation on each answer field. And the idea is that students are less likely to miss out on marks through typing errors or a lack of knowledge of how you use the stack question type. So if I enter an opening parenthesis here, that's never going to be a valid answer to a question. If I enter in a number here, the correct answer for this, the right answer is 2. That's still incorrect, but if I close the braces, it accepts that as valid. It will then, if I check it, it will say, yes, the correct answer is 2. So stack was designed to get around the limitations of question types with teacher-provided answers. And the classic example of this is multiple choice questions. And typically with 4 options, a student has about a does have a 25% chance of getting the correct answer, even if they don't understand the question. And this is why sometimes students refer to them as multi-guess questions. So here you can see it says pick the biggest number in the list. As I say, these are trivial questions. If I start a new preview here, if you look there, the options are 38, 100, 64 and 13. So 100 would be the biggest number in that list. But if I click start a new preview, choose question number 3 again, and you can see that those numbers have changed. In fact, I'll start it again just to see if we get 100 again there, which we shouldn't do. Let's have a look. There you go. So they're random numbers, and they're also shuffled as well. So let's assume that 87, not assume, but I really do know that 87 is the biggest number in that list. And we get 1 out of 1 marks. Excellent. Right. Next page. So show your working. Whatever level of maths that you've studied to, at some point a teacher will have said, but you must show your working. So stack questions can have additional marking for showing your working. This is done using the equivalent reasoning test, where the student must respond with more than one line, and each line must be equivalent to the next line. So the question here is solve the following equation. 5x equals 30 plus 2x. And the question is find the value of x, and the correct answer is x equals 10. So if I respond with x equals 10, it validates it and says that is a potentially valid answer, and I click check here. The response is your answer is partially correct. That is a correct value. However, an additional mark was available if you'd shown your working out. For example, 3x equals 30 and x equals 10. So here I just got 1 out of the possible 2 marks available. Stack questions can have multiple parts to them, but not only can they have multiple parts, they can also have follow-through marking. And what this means is if a student makes an error on part A and part B depends on the answer to part A, this can be taken account of. And this way you can design questions that don't disproportionately punish students for an early error. So part A says, what is 2 times 1? I did say that there was going to be trivial maths involved in this. So when I was at school, 2 times 1 would be 2, but let's assume for some reason I think that 2 times 1 is 3. Part B says, what is 4 times the answer you gave for part A? Well, 4 3s are 12. Let's check on that. And as you would expect, it says that 2 times 1 is not 3. You don't get a mark, you get 0 out of 1. But for part B, it says, correct answer, well done. Your answer for part A was wrong. However, as 3 times 4 is 12, your answer for part B was right. And you can see up here, I got 1 out of 1 for that, but only got 1 out of 2 for the overall question. Now, all of this talk of maths, it's tempting to think of this question type as purely for maths teaching. But there are so many subjects that require different levels of maths. It is also suited for many other areas of obviously perhaps the science subjects, the STEM subjects, but also if you think of psychology and sociology, where you have to do statistics and business, of course. So what you see here is an example of a stat question type that uses the JSXGraph library, which comes bundled with it. And in this example, I've also set the question up to use follow-on marking as in the last example. So let's see what it asked to do here. It says, you have been asked to record the following sales figure on a graph. In January, 10 items were sold. So down here we have, it's currently on 5, and I'm going to set that to 10. In March, the sales are up 50% on February. Well, 50% of 10 is 5, so we'll say 15. And in March, the sales are made a mistake there, it's not 50%, it's 100%. There we go, 100% is at 20. And in March, the sales are at 50% on February, so 50% of February's, that takes me to 30. Okay, so that's the correct response. But I'm not going to, but I have one other thing to answer. It says, what were the average monthly sales for the whole period? So that's 30, 40, 50, 60. So the average would be 3s into 60 goes 20. However, what if for some reason the student responds with 60? So that's incorrect. So now 60, 70, 80, 90, 3s into 90 goes 30. And you can see here that it says, yes, that was correct, and that was correct, but that's not correct. However, the average is correct. It says, although the value entered for one or more of the months was not correct, you have correctly calculated the average for the values you entered. So the marks for this submission were 3 out of 4 overall, or 1 out of 1 for that part of it. So you get 3 out of 4. You lose 1 mark for that one thing. So the student is not disproportionately punished for early errors. So this is really another example, just using a different type of graph. It says, you've been asked to record the following sales figure on a graph. In January, 10 items were sold. So January here, we go to 10. Notice as well the way it jumps. I've set this up to jump from one value to the next there, because so that you don't have to, you're less likely to, student is less likely to make an error when entering figures. So in February, there's a 50% up on the sales for January. What's 50% of that? Should be 15. You can see the slight ghostly indication of what the value is chosen there. And in April, the sales were January, February, March. There's an error here, that should say March, but let's run with that. 100% of February is 15. 100% of 15 is another 15. There we go there. Drag the points. You can imagine using this kind of question in a business class, or perhaps a more complex version of it. Check. And there we go. We've got all the marks available there. So again, this is a businessy style thing with multiple choice. This is really to illustrate that you can use this JSXGraph library to create illustrations here. It does require some skills, some JavaScript skills in order to create these graphics sorts of questions, but it is fairly straightforward programming. So it says, what percentage of the circle is section A? So let's have a look there. Is it 11, 33, 25, 31? I think it is. It's the smallest amount. So there, let's check that. Correct. Well done. Well done, me. All right. Move on. Okay. And here's a classic from the maths you tend to do at school. It says, give the right angled triangle with a left hand height of 8 and a horizontal width of 7. What is the length of the long side? Luckily, it's given me the answer here. It says the correct answer is 10.63, but it will accept an answer within 10%. So if I say 10.6 here, it's going to validate it. Yeah, that is what I meant. Check. again, it says your answer is partially correct. You get half marks because your response was within 10% of the correct answer. And one of the great features of Stack is that you can add in highly customized feedback. So you can see here, this gives a description of the Pythagoras' theory of the square on the hypotenuse is equal to sum of the squares on the other two sides, dragging it up from memory. Here, so I've got half out of 10 there. Last question here, very similar concept. It says drag the points to the line so it represents the formula x equals y. Clue, the line must pass through the point where the x and y axis join. So the x and y must be the same here. So if I say, so that's at 2, as minus 2, minus 2, that looks good. If I go over here and plus 2, plus 2, plus 2 there, do a check, and it says correct. Finish attempt. So that is the stack question type. Thank you very much for listening.